So it's been a while. I've had a few bikes on review and we said we were going to do an update on them. And some of you were, shall we say, interested in Molly here, which is my bike from about 1930 something. So as a little bit of an egg for you all, at the end of the video I'm going to tell you a little bit about Molly. This is our Fiido D11. We got this bike on review a little while ago, I think quite a few years. I'll link to the original review video in the down below. Now this one, it has actually been somewhat supplanted by another bike that we got on review, but I like to keep it around because there are some very specific features of this bike which are really handy around town in a city. So let me pop its little kickstand out and we'll go through its spec. Unfortunately, I don't have the specs for the bike as we got it. I have in front of me the 2025 specs, which may be a little bit different, but from memory feel about right. So it comes with a 36 volt 2 amp charger, it has a 417.6 watt hour battery, and it has a 250 watt drive unit. It comes with a 7-speed Shimano derailleur, which is, as it says, 7-speed under shifters and rear cogs. Now in the 2025 model, it has a torque sensor. This version that I'm riding, if I recall correctly, has a cadence sensor, which is one of its problems. It has disc brakes, it has that front and rear, and it also has an aluminum alloy front and rear hub and rims. The spokes are stainless steel, and it comes with 20-inch tyres. The net weight of the Fiido D11 is 19.5 kilos, and it can carry a payload of 120 kilograms. All right, so I have been riding this bike on and off for a while, and one of the things that I think we have to talk about is the folding mechanism, because that is actually the reason that we were interested in this bike. At the time that we got it, it was pretty uncommon to have bikes offered to us that were folding. Obviously, there are many bikes out there now that have this feature. On this one, there is a latch on the side which has a little locking mechanism. You unlock it, pull the latch, and then the bike folds in half. The handlebars also fold down, and at the back you have to take the seat out if you want to get it as small as possible, and then you're left carrying the seat and the battery. In some senses that's actually really nice. When I've wanted to lock this up, I've sometimes taken the battery with me, and that has been good, except when I left the cafe and left the battery propped on the seat, which not ideal. However, while this bike has been fine, and surprisingly so, given that this version that we have is not IP rated. The battery pack is not IP rated. In fact, actually, when we got it, we had to take some covers off, and yeah, the bike is built to a price, and you can feel that when you start getting the covers off. But despite that, despite riding it on and off through the winter when I've needed to, I actually have not had a problem with the battery pack or the controller having issues in wet weather. And as you know, while it is currently incredibly sunny while I'm filming, it does occasionally rain up here. Now, the things that have gone well. The battery seems to have held up pretty well. I haven't noticed any significant drop in range in the time that I've had it. I don't keep this bike charged all the time because I don't often need it. What I mostly use it for is when I'm taking the car for a service, because this bike I can fold down, throw in the back, and then I can cycle home, and the bus service in the city that I live in is suboptimal. Sort your buses out, United States. But it does that really well. The bike hasn't got any like cracks or welding issues that have shown up, which I have seen on some of the cheaper e-bikes that have been out there, and the road surfaces around here aren't that great, so that's always a good sign. I haven't actually had to do very much maintenance on it. I've done some oiling of various points, a little bit of greasing on the chain, and obviously I also have kept an eye on the brake pads, but they don't seem to have worn down significantly. That's probably down to a fairly low amount of usage. There are two places though which really let this bike down, which is very unfortunate because actually in many ways I like it. One is the battery. So the battery does not stay charged. I don't actually know the specific chemistry of the battery, it just says lithium ion. And what I have found is that if I leave this bike off charge for a few weeks, then it's flat. So if you're riding it every day and you're topping it up every day, that's not so much of a problem. But for me, someone who, like I said, fair weather biker, only really bikes for fun now and then, yeah, that's suboptimal. And I've come out and found it completely stone cold flat. That said, like I mentioned before, the battery does seem to have held up. I have recharged it and not found a significant range drop, so that is good. But I don't know quite what's going on with that battery. You can leave it either plugged in. There's a cord here that plugs into the battery so that you can remove it when you're locking the bike up. And you can also obviously disconnect it. I've tried leaving it with the battery connected. I've tried leaving it with it disconnected. In either case, it has ended up going flat. The other place that has really let it down, and I think this is the most unfortunate problem, is that the folding mechanism has got very unreliable. So it doesn't always latch in place. When you unlatch it, it will not lock. I have spent an embarrassing amount of time outside the Kia dealer trying to work out what exactly is going on. It looks like the little component that's meant to spin and latch doesn't quite spin and latch. I've tried greasing it, I've tried not greasing it because it hadn't been greased. And none of those things has resolved this problem. And that is unfortunate because actually as a folding bike, in many regards, I've found it really nice. It's been useful to, like I say, throw in the car. If I was going to give this bike some kind of a star rating, which I'm not really, it would score quite highly. The display is nice and clear. The brakes are pretty good. They are a little bit grabby, particularly because I've never managed to get that front disc, which is quite thin, to a point where it's perfectly flat. And so going down steep hills, I do find it kind of applies and then releases a little bit. It takes a bit of practice. And yeah, all right. You really do feel the places where they've cut the price on this bike. But also, if you're someone who is just occasionally using a bike and you don't mind keeping it on charge, then it's maybe not such a bad option. I haven't had call to use their after-sales support. I suppose I could call them about this locking mechanism, but there's no easy way to replace it, so I think I'm pretty much stuck with it as is. And that is one of the things that bugs me about cheap e-bikes, is the repairability. This has Shimano gears. Great, you can get them off the shelf. It has a Shimano changer up here. Great, you can get it off the shelf. Brakes though. Brakes, no idea where you get the parts for. Don't know. Motor. Xiongda. The motor is made by Xiongda. And yeah, if something breaks at the end of the day, and if Fiido disappear into the sun, then you can probably replace the controller on this bike with one that's off the shelf from Amazon. You can probably replace that motor when it decides to die with one that's off the shelf from Amazon, but it's not a case of just simply ordering basic parts that are standard. And so I do worry about its longevity. The battery pack is obviously custom to this bike, and so if that dies and Fiido aren't around, then you're a bit stuffed. And the one thing that has really kind of bugged me is this seat. I find this seat staggeringly uncomfortable. Perhaps I should have a more narrow butt. I don't know. But otherwise, it's been a solid effort. All right, on to bike number 2. And this bike, well, this bike is an example of Pimp My Ride, because I have pimped it out a little bit. Let's bring you over here, Scoria? This is the Mokwheel Scoria, and I will again link to our original review in the down below and on our website. In contrast to the rather puny 250 watts of the motor in the Fiido, this one has a 750 watt 48 volt brushless rear hub motor. It offers a payload capacity of 350 pounds. It is a Class 2 bike which offers pedal assist allegedly up to 25 miles an hour, although maybe not quite. It weighs 81 pounds, that's 37 kilos, and its stated range is around 60 to 80 miles, although honestly, I think you're going to push it to get more than 50. It has Tektro HD E350 hydraulic disc brakes. It has torque sensors and a 7-speed Shimano rear derailleur. It's got a 44-tooth aluminium alloy crankset, which I find the gearing is a little low on, and it has a bright and clear little screen. Accompanying it, however, and very usefully, is a $400 inverter, which offers 1 kilowatt peak at 110 volts, also offers 2 Type-C outputs, one is 100 watts and one is 27 watts, and it also offers a 12 volt 10 amp barrel connector output, which can be combined with solar panels for charging. In addition, it offers 2 AC 110 volt outlets, and it is a modified sine wave inverter. Alright, so when I said I have pimped my ride, what have I added? Well, I got this bike and it came with the rear carrier here. But up front, we have a phone holder because I like to be able to navigate while I'm out and about. I have a water bottle. I have obviously got the inverter mount, and I added a front carrier because I actually find that really useful. I have some elastic bungees in there, which mean that I can just throw stuff in there. The one thing I wish this bike had that it really doesn't is a better locking mechanism, because I have these 2 stupid locks that I kind of have on here and they're kind of bungeed in place. The other thing that I added, just because I wondered if they would work, is these rear view mirrors, because I ride this bike obviously in town. It is designed as a bike that you can use off-road, but this is very much the town-friendly cargo version. And while I have, in fact, taken it off-road and had an enormous amount of fun with it, it's also most at home in town. And so I got these mirrors. They are actually original Mokwheel ones, but they were ones that I bought new old stock or open box, I think open box. And they are useless. They are completely useless, which is about what I expected. And at some point I need to take them off because they just kind of flop around, and I've tried adjusting them as far as I can take it without the thing breaking, and they still just flop around. They remind me actually of the mirrors I used to have on my MZ ETZ 125, which came from the Turkish factory that started making East German motorcycle parts. And they would just kind of, you'd get up to speed and they just, and that's what happens with these. So don't get the mirrors. The cup holder works fine. Well, the bottle holder works fine. The phone mount, just be careful. My phone, it happens to hit the power button if I position it inaccurately. If I'm just a little bit incautious, then I lose the power button and then it switches off, which obviously doesn't really go very well. This bike has, however, been extremely useful, and perhaps not for the reasons that, you know, Mokwheel might want you to think about a bicycle, but for the reasons that sometimes just crop up in the world. And that is that you can remove the battery and you can take it somewhere else with the inverter. And they pitch this as, you know, you can use it at a campsite, you can use it when you're out and about. Great, all very good. I can also use it to power my fridge when there's a power cut. And we don't have power cuts enormously often, but I have had a couple. And this thing will generate about 1 kilowatt for 1 hour. A fridge does not require that. And so we can just throw this inverter and the battery pack in the house, plug the fridge in, we're golden. I've checked the modified sine wave. It is pretty close to a pure sine wave, close enough for our purposes. The fridge seems happy with it, it doesn't complain, which is better than it did on our previous modified sine wave inverter, where it would just fail to start up and then the inverter would start screaming about power draw. In terms of range, like I said, I've been getting 50-ish miles out of it, estimated. I have not been for a 50-mile bike ride, but I've done more than 30. And actually this weekend we were thinking of going out. We went out for a walk and I realized there's a 20-something mile bike trail that's fairly near my house. So I am probably going to go do that one of these days when I'm not at work, and also when it's not very, very warm. The other thing that I have been very pleased about with this bike is that unlike the Fiido, which is over there basking in the sunlight, this one doesn't go flat. I have left this bike off charge for months at a time because, yes, like I said, fair weather biker, you may have noticed Washington State has some rain, and I come back and it's still charged. It's still saying nearly fully charged. You put it on the charger, it charges for a few minutes and then it's like, no, I'm done. And that is very impressive. I found that really useful as someone who doesn't ride regularly, to not need to charge the bike up when I want to take it for a ride. It just sits there and I go, oh, hey, let's go for a ride. Bike's ready. I'm ready. We go. In fact, I'm thinking of taking it for a ride tomorrow because I'm going somewhere local and I don't need to take the car. One of the things that we also need to address with this Mokwheel is that when I got it and when I filmed the original review, the battery pack in the bike threw errors. In fact, there were several occasions where I had to turn the bike off and back on because the bike had thrown errors. And I talked to Mokwheel about this. They actually sent out a replacement pack. They did want the original pack back, but it's incredibly difficult near me to ship a battery pack of this size. So it's still sitting packaged, ready to go, which I really need to find a way to get it to the nearest city where they have a facility where they can ship batteries. But actually Mokwheel have said they're not that worried at this point, since the replacement pack has fixed the problem. I don't have any more problems. I haven't seen that error where the bike stops working because the battery is not charging properly or not discharging properly. I never saw any errors charging with that pack, so I don't quite know what's up with it. I had tried it with the inverter as well, and I similarly didn't see any problems with it, so it seems to be an intermittent fault. Who can say? But I will say that of the two, this is the bike that gets the most use. Because one, it has more power, so I'm able to actually keep up with traffic, although it doesn't gradually let off its assist at 25 miles an hour. It's 25 and it cuts off, and it's not really 25, it's more like 23, which I find a little frustrating, but what the hell. I also think that this is geared more for riding. It's difficult to say because you want it to be rideable without assistance, but I find that at the level of assistance it's providing, even on minimal assistance, at 25 miles an hour, my feet are spinning so fast, it's ridiculous. And that is a problem on both the bikes, that the gearing isn't really, I guess, tall enough to allow for the amount of assistance they're providing, which is kind of frustrating. It does make it less fun to ride, but so long as you're kind of pootling around and not trying to belt across the city because you're in a hurry, not that I'm ever late for anything, you understand, then, you know, it would be nice to have a little bit more space at the top of that gearing. If I had to pick one, then yes, this bike hands down, although the Fiido is super useful when I need to go places, because this thing is a beast. If you leave the battery pack in and you put a bike carrier on the back, then you are actually quite likely to near the tongue weight on a lot of smaller cars. So throwing this on the back is not advisable with the battery pack in. In fact, Mokwheel themselves, when they sell the rear carrier for this bike, it explicitly says, do not try and take your bike on the carrier with the battery pack, because the battery pack is where a lot of the weight is. But yeah, the Mokwheel has proven surprisingly resilient, surprisingly pleasant, and I want to say again, repairability is probably a long-term concern, but again, you have Shimano gears. They're at least off the shelf. What will happen with that rear wheel motor if something goes wrong, though, is a bit of a problem because it's in a cast wheel. Unlike the Fiido over there with its lovely little spokes where you could just get new spokes and a new hub put in, this one, that hub motor is mounted in the wheel, so you may end up replacing the whole wheel, and that's going to be a whole affair that we don't even want to think about. All right. Before I die of heat exhaustion, let's bring out the other bike. So literally every time I have recorded a video about my bikes or reviewing a bike, I've mentioned Molly here. Molly is at least from the 30s, possibly from the late 20s, I would guess. It's very hard to say. BSA, the company that made it, don't really exist anymore. And obviously serial numbers for bikes were a bit of a thing that they didn't keep records of. However, I know it was around during the Second World War or around then, because when I purchased Molly from the bric-a-brac shop in Bristol that I found her in, down by the canal, there was this big old warehouse, and they mainly did furniture and they did some interior goods. And there she was, walking next to me, singing. No, there she was, stood there with her war-grade tyres on, looking incredibly sad, like tyres flat, rusty rims, and just, I kind of fell in love. And at that point, I didn't ride a bike. I hadn't ridden a bike in literally years. I think the last time I'd ridden a bike was when I'd lived in Bristol before, and I'd borrowed Nikki's wife's bike to ride somewhere and nearly died. So I asked the guy how much he wanted, and I think it was like £50, and I was like, sure, whatever, looks fine. At that point, she had BSA gears at the back, 3 of them, allegedly, and she has rod brakes, which allow me to book in some light retardation a few months in the future, if they're not too busy. And I kind of sat her in the garage, and then I realised that I could cycle to work, and this was my daily commuter for the multiple years that I worked in Bristol. I rode my 1930s bike to work pretty much every day. She's called Molly because she had a tag on her which said M Lane, I think, and then the address of a local farm. So I slightly wonder if she is a bike that came to Bristol during the Second World War, when people moved from the cities out to the countryside to help with the war effort. I don't know though. I've never managed to trace any more history than that. And yeah, I love this bike. I haven't actually ridden it for a long time. Today is the first time she's been out of the garage in a long time, because I am horribly unfit and a fair weather cyclist, and having an e-bike is nice. That's one reason. The other reason is that I live at the top of 2 reasonably steep hills. And so when I want to go into town, I want a bike that is actually going to stop. And I have enough self-preservation, which maybe I didn't have back then, that not being able to stop is a problem. I actually have a resolution to that, which is that the rear wheel has been completely rebuilt. I have a rim for the front wheel, but I've never actually got it done. The reason the rear wheel got rebuilt is because while I say it had the BSA 3-speed hub, the BSA 3-speed hub differs somewhat from the Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub, and in my case it differed insofar as the BSA 3-speed hub had 1.5 gears, maybe 2 on a good day. And so when I would select another gear, sometimes I would get it and sometimes not, and being not a hugely fit person, it was exhausting to ride up hills with only one choice of gear and another gear that came and went. So I eventually conceded defeat. I spent years trying to find someone who actually still had the BSA parts. No one did. I do still have the original wheel up there. If someone ever wants to machine the parts and return it to its original state, then they could. But yeah, I conceded defeat and got a Sturmey Archer put in. Still 3 speeds, because that way I could keep the little shifter down here, which is a 3-speed shifter. I love this bike. But one of the reasons that I brought it out today, other than the fact that everyone asks me about her, is one of the things that's really good about this bike is that everything is serviceable. Down here is a little tiny flap where you can drop oil in, and it drops oils on the bearings to allow you to keep those bearings going, and then you can replace them when you need to. And yes, in theory, you can replace the sealed bearings in those bikes. But it's a lot of hassle. I have replaced the ball bearings in this bike. They are ball bearings. You take them out and you put fresh ones in. It is really very easy. Everything on this bike is adjustable. Everything on this bike is pretty standardized. I can get a wheel off the shelf, or I could once. To be fair, now the rim shape has changed and I had to import the rims from India when I bought them in England, and then I brought them over here. But it's a standard rim of the time. It's a standard hub of the time. It's a standard hub at the back. You know, here I am in 2025 not 1825. Feels like 1825. Here I am in 2025, and I can still buy spares for this bicycle, and they're not a problem to obtain. At some point, one day, I might get around to rehabbing the saddle, which is a war grade saddle. It is not leather, it is fabric covered with some kind of material, which is, you can tell that I actually rode her because it's disintegrated from me riding. And actually over here it has a small piece of gauze from a pack of medical gauze because I'd worn through there and I'd worn through the seat. At some point I would love to put the skirt catcher back on. I know that this dress is maybe not quite long enough to catch in the wheel, but sometimes I wear dresses that are long enough for that. The other things that are interesting, like just in a purely historical perspective, I had to install a reflector because it didn't have one, so I found a 1930s or 40s one to install, which I'm rather fond of. She did actually come, if I remember rightly, with a dynamo, but the dynamo had died and I ended up taking it off because it was so badly seized. Yeah. So that's my BSA 3-speed. I really should get out and ride her a bit more because she's really very nice to ride. And the funny thing is, when I got her, I remember thinking, Jesus, this bike is heavy. She is entirely steel. She is made of probably pre-war design with steel that is thick. And after, what, 90 years is still... There's some surface rust down here, that's it. The rest of it is absolutely great. Yeah. Compared to a modern e-bike though, she's felt. You can lift her with one hand? Yeah, one hand. So, that is my bike collection. If I only had to have one, probably Molly, and I'll go get her a motor.
Thanks for joining us today. And if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord room, on our Patreon page, down below, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and helping us to remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here and mispronounced horribly by me, just follow the links below. We've got options across a range of different price points from $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Mwesi, Lay Magyar, MX Flounder, Nitmer, Thrill Nelly, Hernan Geraldo, Christopher Bloodworth, Eric Rouvier, Ronnie E. Bickers Jr., Brett Mason, George Pinney, Mega XLR, Robert Coghill, Peter Brodke, Gary Wood, Dessa Bird Traveller, Tim van der Loog, Mike Clark, Kyle Olin, Rob Hutchinson, Tony Leidig, Chris Nichols, Tempest, Adrian Atwater, Doug Lloyd, Mitch Rassner, and Brad. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame, and you can even gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations. And we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, for the time being, addressed below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you're someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so we get the commission, not Jeff Bezos. So we can continue to focus on making our content even better and reduce burnout, we're being a little freer with our release days, but plan on dropping new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on our main channel, plus something on Sunday over on TE Take 2. If you want more, the algorithm that hates us thinks you should be watching this video, but this video is the one we'd like you to check out. Be kind, be awesome, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving!